Thank you for joining the podcast for Grasping the Word 2024. Our verse today is 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12. Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. Of course, Paul is writing to his a young minister of Timothy, one that he affectionately calls his son, and not speaking of a son in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense, in that he was a son in the gospel. And it's the same way that he addressed Titus also. And so we know that he had a lot of influence upon their lives into making them into the ministers that they were to become. And such is almost the instruction here in 1 Timothy to Paul and from Paul to Timothy. And you can see that where Paul is giving the instructions, even in this 12th verse, let no man despise thy youth, and instructing him as a father would a son. In the following verses, I would like to read verses 13 through 16 also. Till I come, give attendance to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. Neglect not the gift that is in thee, which was given thee by prophecy, with the laying on of the hands of the presbytery. Meditate upon these things, give thyself entirely or wholly to them, that thy profiting may appear to all. Take heed unto thyself and unto the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this thou shalt both save thyself and them that hear thee. So one of the keys that we could see here in leadership, and Paul is trying to bring to Timothy's attention, is what John Maxwell called the law of priorities. And in the Leadership Bible by John Maxwell that I have here, in this 1 Timothy chapter 5, he has a column here about the law of priorities, and taken from what is laid down here by the Apostle Paul to Timothy in his life. And I quote John Maxwell, in the midst of all his teaching about how believers are to relate to one another in the church, Paul prioritizes Timothy's leadership as a pastor. If anyone doesn't provide for his own home, he said, the apostle declares, he cannot expect to provide for the church with any integrity. And he gets that from 1 Timothy 5, verse 8. Leadership starts at the home. If it doesn't work at home, don't export it. Pastors especially must heed this warning. Leadership works best when it is prioritized as follows. Number one, I am first a person. I must give priority to my own relationship with God. Number two, secondly, I am a partner. I must give priority to my relationship with my spouse. Thirdly, I am a parent. I must give priority to my relationship with my children. And number four, I am a pastor. I must also prioritize my relationship with my ministry. So we have, as a person, a partner, a parent, and pastor, I must give leadership in all these areas, and it starts with me as an individual. So Paul is telling Timothy, be an example of the believers, not just to the believers, but of the believers. That means be a light to the world. When they look at our lives, to say, this is what the church looks like. This is what a believer should be like. An example of the believers in word, in conversation, that would mean in our lifestyle, in our behaviors, in charity, which is love, in spirit, in faith, in purity. And of course, he also emphasized in verse 13, give attendance to reading, to exhortation, and to doctrine. And so Paul is telling Timothy that even though he is a young man, that he can certainly be an example of the believers if he takes charge of his own life. If he becomes a leader of himself in establishing his own relationship with God, a leader to his spouse, a leader to his children, and ultimately he'll be a better leader for the church. So, areas that God has given all of us, areas of influence in our life, we must take the leadership, and we will be effective in influencing others in their journey to become what Jesus Christ wants them to be.